Namaskar, welcome back to Media Scan. We are here with your weekend dose of headlines, controversies and perspectives. Viewers, all through the week, the world media has been hogged by headlines from the disturbing developments happening in West Asia, the Israel-Hamas war. Prime Minister Narendra Modi not once but twice made it very clear that India stands strongly with Israel. And yet, we have seen some discordant voices within our country totally breaking the tradition that the country must speak in one voice when it comes to foreign policy. At the same time, there are questions why the world doesn't come together when Indians face terror attacks the way it is doing in the case of Israel. All this and many other related issues in this very special episode of Media Scan this weekend. I have here with me well-known strategic affairs analyst, war veteran, Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain. I welcome General Hasnain to Media Scan for the first time this evening. Namaskar, General Hasnain. Welcome, sir.
Namaskar ji. Thank you very much for inviting me here.
And with us, Aditya Kothari, who lives in the UK and lately has been facing and observing the situations which arise and the response of the Western world when Indians, particularly Hindus, are terrorized. They have to face discrimination, also terror. Aditya Kothari is also the founder of the Indic Society, which you must be seeing a lot about on digital media. Namaskar, Aditya, welcome. Also here with me, our guest in the studio, Dr. Meena Singh Roy. She is Senior Fellow at the Institute of Defence Study and Analysis, what we refer to as ITSA. Welcome, Dr. Roy.
Thank you, and pleasure being here.
And can I come to General Hasnain first? Sir, in your experience, have you ever witnessed India taking the kind of clear, unequivocal position that Prime Minister did when Israel faced the horrific attack earlier? And what is your comment to the fact that a certain section in the media, particularly the Western media, is saying India's reiteration of its decades-old stand with regard to Palestine is a sort of a climb down? Do you subscribe to that, sir?
Not at all, ma'am. I think Prime Minister Modi was unequivocal on one issue which we have held very dear to us, that terrorism cannot be allowed to survive on the surface of this earth. The moment this was known that this operation of such brutality was conducted by Hamas against unarmed civilians at a distance of 3-4 kilometers, even in a music festival going on, it was very clear that this was nothing more than a terrorist attack. They may have had tactical connotations, that is something apart, that is something completely different. But the objectives were terrorist-oriented. And Prime Minister Modi essentially tweeted his condemnation of terrorism. I think there can't be greater clarity, because this morning is very clear also that India continues to reiterate its stance on the two-state policy. We have always followed this policy that we support the creation of the state of Palestine and we support the state of Israel in its existence. There is no two ways about it. There is no change in our policy anywhere that I can see.
Right. So I think I'll take it from here to Dr. Singh Roy. Dr. Meena Singh Roy, the question arises, the fact that Hamas is actually ruling Palestinians and the Arab world, sort of associates with it, is it easy to differentiate between Hamas and the rest of the Palestine cause in a political way? Do they cross somewhere?
Actually, let me tell you, it's a very, very complex issue. It's one has to actually go back to the history. And today, when you see the act which Hamas has committed, it's a terrorist organization, Right. You cannot give any excuse to the kind of violence that has been inflicted on the innocent civilians. This is not to deny the fact that the Palestinians do have the right of their own, but you cannot continue doing this. As far as the Arab world is concerned, I have always wondered, when I started working on the Middle East and these issues. Now, how serious has the Arab world been with the Palestinian issue? That is also a question.
You mean coming to a resolution and agreed solution?
We've been talking about the solution of the problem, but how much seriousness have we really seen in finding a solution? But if you have the terrorist, controlling people like this, what is the kind of solution that we're looking for? And the civilians, the women, the kids, they become, victim of violence today. That is what is the worrisome question.
Then doesn't that bring us to a question more closer home? And that is, considering the kind of violence that were perpetrated by the Hamas, and I think the full scale of the violence is still coming out as more and more pictures come out, and the Israelis are able to dig out a lot of things which happened, which in the first 2 days they were not able to fathom. It raises the question. I was going through the CWC resolution passed earlier this week. It not only doesn't mention the Hamas, it doesn't even talk of the violence which occurred there. And so if you were to follow the CWC resolution, it would appear as if, nothing at all happened in Israel. So my question is, ma'am, have you in your experience and observation ever noted a situation where the country takes, the political class of the country takes a position so stridently different from the government of the day?
Listen, as I said, the governments, they will have their own, reasons to follow a certain line. When it comes to the question of, such velocity of the problem that we are seeing today, you have to understand that, when we look at the Palestinian, you have Hamas, you have Fatah. Now, there is no unity. There isn't the kind of cooperation that you see between. How do you come to the issue of peace when you're not even united? I think that is one question. What is the credibility of the government when you have the one element which is only willing to inflict, violence and terror?
Violence.
This is where the problem lies, I think. And
General Hasnain, will you like to add a line to it before I come to Aditya Kothari? Have you heard the political class of the country speaking in such very, very stridently opposed voices, particularly in cases of foreign policy, sir?
Ma'am, what normally happens is that when issues are as complex as this, and when knee-jerk initial responses are made, there are some times when you have differences of opinion which are expressed. Yes, you see, you have all segments of society in India, and India being such a vibrant democracy, you do find people expressing different thoughts and aspirations, etc., for different segments of society around the world. To that extent, there's nothing wrong. But in this case, complex as it is the issue which is contextual.
Yes.
It is this issue of terrorism. What has happened on 6th and 7th of October pales everything in the past, pales everything back in which has happened in the past.
Precisely.
It is this which needs to be taken in context, and every right-thinking person should first condemn this, and then look at the larger issue. Well, if you notice, this is exactly what is happening in the Arab world also. They are being very, very careful about it, about utterances, because they don't want to be seen to be on the wrong side of the divide. So they are very, very measured in their statements. Unfortunately, in India, sometimes that does not happen. But we are a little more strident in our approach in mentioning things. I think Prime Minister Modi's approach of the first day itself condemning terrorism, because you have to remember, India is the one which sought the definition of terrorism in the United Nations. It has not happened in the last 27 years that no one has defined what is terrorism. If all this had happened, perhaps it is easier for people to be able to take stands today. This grey zone which you are seeing today is primarily because of this.
Point taken, sir. And I'd like to come to Aditya Kothari here. Aditya Kothari, not only did the Prime Minister stand unequivocally with Israel, in another event not related to this, he made it very clear that the world will have to come to one common agreed definition of terrorism. You know, there is no such thing as a good terrorist or a bad terrorist, or that one, you know, one side looks at something as a resistance and the other defines it as terror. However, the Prime Minister's position, which he has spoken on earlier occasions as well, brings me to the question. You have been witness to a lot of violence last year and earlier, so, you know, in the context of Leicester and other adjoining suburbs, etc., when Indians, particularly of the Hindu community, were badly terrorized, attacked, they were intimidated, they were gherowed inside a temple, and various other incidents have been reported. Similarly, we had the recent standoff with Canada, where it seems Canada very, very clearly gives a free run to the Khalistani terrorists. Incidents have been happening in the US, in Australia, elsewhere. Do you feel the world, particularly the Western world, displays a kind of a discriminatory, or I would say, you know, a not so worried attitude when India faces terror?
That's correct. I think, you know, it was sometime in February this year when Dr. Jaishankar, in a podcast with another outlet, also mentioned that, you know, it's become a habit for Western democracies to essentially play the politics of India on their soil. And we've been seeing this not from today. We're seeing this right from the 70s and 80s. You know, we will remember there was an Indian diplomat who was abducted and brutally tortured and killed in Birmingham. You know, Ravindra Matre was his name. And from there on, you know, if you look at the different events that have happened, the different kind of attacks that have happened at Indian diplomats visiting United Kingdom, for instance, or the attacks on the Indian missions in London, in San Francisco, in Canada, it points to gross negligence of security apparatus that needs to be provided to diplomatic missions. And it violates, you know, the fundamentals of the Geneva Conventions for diplomatic missions.
So why do you think they are less than sensitive about safety of Indian diplomats and the Indian community otherwise, or, you know, the sensitivities of Indians?
There is some amount of electoral compulsions as well, because we all know that in the West there are sort of groups which consolidate and function as a single vote bank. You know, their institutionalization is very, very strong. So they do not want to essentially jeopardize that particular vote bank. Now, whether that be the Islamist vote bank or whether that be the Khalistanis who essentially coerce and intimidate, you know, their sort of diaspora into falling in line and sort of following a certain trajectory when it comes to electoral politics. Right. So they are very, very affirmative on that stance. Whereas when you look at the sort of the Hindu diaspora, they're extremely fragmented. For example, you know, people who work within the services class or the services industry in the UK will tend to vote for the Labour Party. People who work within you know, private institutions and financial institutions will tend to vote for the Conservatives. So they're extremely fragmented. That doesn't happen.
So they do not vote as a single entity, you are saying?
That's correct. That's correct.
So fine, I'll come back to it, very, very clearly put for the benefit of our viewers. If I can come back to Dr. Singh Roy here. Ma'am, I'd like to come back to West Asia.
Yes.
And the question here is, we have seen reports of, you know, some attack at the Damascus airport and you know, nearby areas. There are worrying indications that perhaps what is happening between Israel and Palestine could well spill over other parts of that region. Number one, are you afraid, ma'am, that this could be having a wider paradigm, the violence? And also, do you think some efforts that we have been hearing from the US side, etc., about following the norms of war and sparing civilians, do you think there is any hope that it will not build up into a full-scale war at all?
Well, at the moment, if we look at the West Asia and the countries of West Asia, the way they have reacted, and you referred to this event in Damascus. Now, you see, my worry is that there is a likely situation that we don't know how this is going to unfold. It is too early to start predicting how it will. It will also depend on how the other regional and the major actors are responding to this particular situation which is unfolding. What is very clear.
But there is also a question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to be clear. Even if the West and other powers make an effort, is Israel in a mood to listen?
I don't think. You see, what has happened with Israel today, you know, it is the rage, it is the anger. And, you know, this is something, and there is a public opinion. They are also answerable as far as the security of their civilians are concerned. Now, the way the damage was inflicted on innocent people, you know, this is something which internally I don't think at this point in time, and they have made it very public, that there is no negotiation which is going to happen. And how do you push that country which is small in size, highly securitized, and for the first time, you know, this is the scale of death that they have witnessed in last so many decades. I don't think, you know, this is going to stop as far as Israel is concerned. But does that mean the international community, the other responsible actors should not try and attempt to see to it that there is a less damage done to the civilians? Now, whether it is going to be achievable, what is going to be the outcome of it, we really don't know as of now.
Right.
But
so we'll, yes, please make your point.
So, but for us who are sitting in India, I think the larger, you know, problem here is that this should not get escalated beyond the borders of, you know, Israel and Gaza. That is what the worry is. It should not convert into a larger regional conflict, and I think that would be very, very damaging given the situation that we are already in, pandemic, the Ukraine conflict. And now I don't think that that the world is ready to accept any kind of a, you know, conflict, a bigger regional conflict here.
Fine. General Hasnain, Dr. Singh Roy has just articulated her concern that it doesn't look like we'll be able to stop the war, perhaps. It's already underway. But at least we can try to, you know, keep it within Israel and Palestine, perhaps Gaza, and not allow it to spill over to become a larger regional, you know, conflict. However, the other concern that we are having here is we have seen an overwhelming number of Indians standing out in support and trying to, you know, voice their support in whatever manner they can through social media, through other means. And even the Israeli ambassador is on record to say that he's never expected such kind of an overwhelming support. But at the same time, demonstrations are happening in various small parts, small cities and small towns of the country, trying to, you know, sort of articulating support for Palestine, but at the same time trying to justify what Hamas has done. Also, when we see images of how Pakistan has been trying to train and help Hamas in various ways, and you know, some voices that are coming from here and there, do you think some kind of a threat is possible in India by people who want to use this opportunity to create disharmony in the country? Should we not remain alert, sir?
Thank you. That's a complex question, but a very good question, if I may say. And I would start by saying it's the level of India's own political maturity, it's the level of Indian democracy, which will ensure, to my mind, my perception will ensure that what is happening in West Asia does not travel and the sentiments do not travel into India to create any internal security problems of that kind. I am quite certain about my country that we have the capability to withstand these kind of sentiments and overcome them. We have the political maturity to do it. Let me come to the issue which you asked Dr. Singh Roy herself,
Yes.
and she gave a very, very good articulate answer on it. The issue of the spread of this conflict. You see, I have visited Israel, I have been to all the borders of Israel, and I know what the vulnerability of different borders are. At the moment, thankfully, this war is only restricted to the Gaza Strip. It's a very small portion of southern Israel where this exists.
Yes.
The Egypt border has been closed with Gaza. Israel has closed that border off. There were attempts by Egypt to try and bring in humanitarian aid, but that was stopped also. So Gaza is now sealed from every direction. The threat which can come on Israel, which will require a response, could also be from Hezbollah, which is in the northern side, on the Lebanese border. You have a fairly long Lebanon-Israel border. You also have the West Bank. But the West Bank is generally benign because you have the Palestinian Authority of Mahmoud Abbas, which is there, which has not been at loggerheads or in any violent kind of a loggerheads against the government of Israel. So what the concern is primarily that of the Lebanese border and towards Egypt and of course Gaza itself. I think the next 6-7 days are very crucial because the sentiment of retribution within Israel, within its armed forces, within its people is very intense, and the government will have to let out a certain amount of steam by carrying out certain operations. This morning we have already witnessed to the fact that many of the hostages have been actually rescued by some very, very brave acts by the Israeli special forces which have gone in and done this. So that's a heartening thing. At least it shows that the hostages are out and a ground incursion operation by Israel is likely to be launched. How much of destruction takes place, we'll have to see. But what is going to be very, very crucial for the international community is how many people are going to be homeless, how many people are going to be without food and water. Because the government of Israel will take this up to a level to treat it like a weapon. But beyond that, it will become very dangerous. The international community will start going against it. And I think Israel has a level of maturity to ensure that the support it has from the international community is not lost at the altar of continued operations inside Gaza.
Yes, so I get your point, sir. I mean, in few words, we can say that since there is so much anger among the Israelis at the moment, perhaps when some of that steam is let out, a sort of the sense will prevail. And also when pictures of the homeless, etc. come out, there will certainly be questions about how far it can be allowed to go, and then a sort of a middle point may be sought. However, I have very little time left, so I would like to come to Aditya Kothari here. Aditya, we are seeing reports coming from all over about many countries in Europe, including UK, who have banned any pro-Hamas or, if I may say, pro-Palestine protests in the, in the name that they are sort of provoking and it can lead to violence, etc. And we did see some very aggressive kind of protest. So in their wisdom, their governments have done this. No such thing is ever visible when people come out to glorify the assassination of a former Indian Prime Minister. In fact, the police comes out to facilitate the float, which glorifies the assassination. In various parts of UK, people come out. There are continuous reports about how institutions, campuses and schools and offices, there is rising Hindu phobia. Do you think a concern is rising? And this conflict of West Asia, though these are unrelated, but will lead to better understanding about the complaints that Indians have been raising and the situation that they are facing. And this spans across from Australia right up to Canada.
Sure, Smitaji, I'll take that question into two parts. One, addressing the Hamas part, and then, with regards to the Hindu Messiah part of things. So, the Hamas founder, Khalid Mashal, has essentially asked Muslims across the globe to essentially gather in some sort of solidarity and demonstrate that solidarity on the streets of the planet on Friday, the 13th of October. So essentially, France, United Kingdom, and other Western democracies have come out and said there will be no further protests, pro-Palestinian protests, that will be allowed as a consequence of that. Whereas in India, a lot of people don't know about this. There is a solidarity protest that's actually going on, and it's happening in Malappuram in Kerala.
Dr. Singh Roy, I'm sorry, we have very little time left, so I'll just ask you for your final comments. How long do you think it will take peace to come back?
I am of a very strong opinion that, war, anger, revenge, they don't deliver peace. So long as your decisions are, made based on these factors, we will never find peace. So I only hope and wish that there is an amicable solution which is decided collectively, keeping these things off. War have never ever delivered peace. So I am not very hopeful of, getting peace without, consensus, without bringing people on table to discuss. And, it is very important that you have to understand that you have to coexist. Now, unless we look towards these kind of solution, minus terrorism, terrorism will never ever, be supported by anybody in the world today.
Point taken. General Hasnain, then there is need for an amicable solution. Coexistence is the only way out, and yet tempers and sentiments are so high at this point of time. Do you see peace coming around anytime soon? Quickly, sir.
Veena ma'am, 75 years ago, this problem started. We should not expect to find solutions in the next 7 days. I absolutely condemn violence. I'm a soldier. I believe in the use of violence only for peace. This is not the use of violence for peace. I therefore feel this is such a complex problem, although it may end in the next 7 to 10 days. The world has to come together to understand that this is a far more complex problem than the way it has been treated. China entering here, looking for peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia and thinking in 2 months they have achieved peace. These are the kind of things which are the wishful kind of a thinking and nothing more than that. The United States thinking that it can withdraw from here, that no other interests lie here because its energy interests are not here anymore. Abraham Accords can achieve everything, is again wishful thinking. So I think the world needs to revisit the entire problem of West Asia and have a look at comprehensive peace. Otherwise, that's not going to come about in this area.
Right. And maybe most unfortunate as it is, maybe at this point, the world, making the world look at the entire West Asia situation in a new way to revisit it could be one of the welcome outcomes of this entire very, very disturbing and unfortunate turn of events. On that note, sir, I am afraid I have completely run out of time. So thank you very much, General Hasnain, for finding the time to connect with us on Media Scan and sharing so much of your perspective on the very complex situation. Also, grateful to Dr. Meena Singh Roy for coming to us and sharing her observations and her study of the situation. Thank you. All indications suggest, and our guests also agree, that perhaps things are going to get worse before they get better. However, maybe this very, very unfortunate turn of events, this violence, can make the world revisit the entire situation as General Hasnain articulated, and ultimately an amicable situation will be found with the least possible loss of civilians and lasting peace in the region. On that note, viewers, it's a wrap up on Media Scan for this evening. See you next weekend. Namaskar.